Ethan was a successful businessman, a symbol of drive and ambition. But behind the spotlight was a wound that never healed, a poor mother he once denied out of shame. A silent woman standing on street corners, gazing at her son with love, while he turned away in cold indifference. He believed she was a burden, never asking if she was hungry, in pain, or simply, "Are you happy, Mom?" Everything changed one night. A strange dream pulled Ethan back into the past, to a rainy street, to the image of his mother cradling a child with tear-filled eyes. Jolted awake, Ethan begins a journey, one that forces him to return, to face the truth he had buried for a lifetime. A heart-wrenching Buddhist tale of a mother's love, karma, and a son's awakening. Part 1. The Forgotten Mother. Drizzle fell softly, each drop clinging to the worn-out shawl of the old woman sitting quietly under the awning of a grand skyscraper. She wasn't begging. She asked for nothing. Just sat there, like a shadow without a name, without a voice. People rushed by. No one remembered how long she had been there. No one cared. Yet her gaze remained fixed on the glass doors in front of her. Inside was the person she had once given everything to protect. Inside the building, Ethan, a successful entrepreneur, smiled confidently as he prepared for a major press conference. Known as a symbol of perseverance and triumph, Ethan was admired for his rags-to-riches story. But no one ever heard him mention the woman behind his rise, a mother who had quietly stood behind him through every storm. Ethan had grown up in a poor neighborhood with his mother, Rosa. She had taken on every job imaginable to raise him, collecting recyclables, scrubbing dishes, anything that paid. She couldn't read, but she taught him compassion, to never let his heart turn to stone. Ethan once loved her deeply, cried whenever her hands cracked from overwork. But as he stepped into the world beyond, shame began to creep in. In circles where success was measured by wealth, looks, and connections, Ethan buried his roots. Lavish parties, applause, and executive meetings slowly faded the image of a worn-out mother from his mind. Once, Rosa came to visit him at his company. She just wanted to see her son and offer him a homemade lunch like she used to. But Ethan refused to meet her. He told his assistant, "I have no relatives." His mother waited in the sun for hours. Eventually, she walked away, carrying her cold lunch with trembling hands. Part 2. The Journey to Find His Mother. After leaving the old neighborhood, Ethan drove home in silence. The city was still bustling, headlights still blazing down endless highways. But inside him, something had shattered. His dreams, his memories, the image of his mother. All of it replayed in his mind like an old film reel, each frame painful, pulling at the corners of a heart he thought he had sealed shut long ago. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He rummaged through drawers until he found an old box, dusty and hidden away. Inside were faded photos from a life he had tried to forget. One showed him standing proudly beside his mother on graduation day, her clothes worn and plain, but her smile shining. Another was of her holding a bowl of noodles, sitting under the porch roof as rain poured around her, exactly like in his dream. And then, there it was, a photo of him as a child, sitting in his mother's lap, holding a wildflower. She was laughing, looking at him with a love that no words could ever capture. Ethan held the picture close. Something inside him stirred. He couldn't let it in like this. The next morning, he made a decision. He would find her. He searched everywhere he could, shelters, hospitals, temples. No one knew of a woman named Rosa. No records, no traces. Just an old woman lost in the sea of a city too vast to remember every soul. Desperate, Ethan drove toward the outskirts, the kind of place his mother once said she wanted to grow old in, surrounded by trees and birdsong. He didn't know what he was looking for, but something in his heart tugged him forward. As the sun began to set, he found himself before a small, humble monastery nestled among whispering pines. The sound of a bell echoed in the air, soft, slow, and calming. Strangely, Ethan felt his heartbeat slow. A monk was sweeping fallen leaves in the yard. An elderly man with bright, gentle eyes that seemed to reflect a deep stillness. Ethan approached, bowed slightly, and asked, "Venerable sir, have you ever met a woman named Rosa?" "She was my mother." The monk looked at him quietly for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Many people pass through here," he said, "but I remember a woman like that. She didn't talk much. She often sat beneath that Bodhi tree over there, eyes closed, listening to the birds. She once said to me, "I'm not looking for anything. I'm just waiting." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. That voice, those words, it had to be her. He followed the monk to a corner of the garden. There, beneath the old Bodhi tree, stood a simple stone marker. No photo, no name, just one line engraved faintly. "A mother's love is like the earth, silently holding you up." Ethan collapsed to his knees. He couldn't even cry, just silence, swelling with pain. Years of ambition, regret, and avoidance, all collapsing into the soil before this simple monument. All he had left was this: a tree, a stone, and a grief that came too late. The monk sat beside him, voice calm and deep. "Do you think your mother wanted you to live forever in sorrow?" Ethan shook his head, tears finally falling. "I abandoned her when she needed me." The monk looked at him with eyes full of knowing. "But she never abandoned you. She told me once, 'My son went far away, but I believe one day he will remember. I only want him to live well.' That's enough." Ethan sobbed. "But I don't deserve forgiveness." The monk replied softly, "In the Buddhist teachings, we speak of boundless compassion, without condition or judgment. Your mother lived by that. She let go of her pain long ago. It is you who have not yet let go of yourself." The wind stirred, rustling the leaves above. Ethan looked up, for the first time in years. He saw the light streaming gently through the branches, warm, quiet, and unwavering. The monk continued, "Karma is not punishment. It is reflection. Cause and effect are not chains, but mirrors. When you see clearly and choose to return, that is the first step toward awakening." Ethan sat in silence. Then, with his palms together and head bowed low beneath the Bodhi tree, he made no grand apology, only a vow whispered deep from within. "I will live the way you wished for me, Mother. I won't run from my past. I will return." Not long after, Rosa moved out of her old boarding house. No one knew where she went. Ethan never asked. Then one night, when everything seemed stable, Ethan had a strange dream. He was a little boy again, standing in a heavy downpour. In front of him was his frail mother, shielding him with a torn raincoat, using her own body to keep him dry. Rain pounded down, soaking her completely. Yet her eyes glowed with gentleness. No blame, no complaint, just the look of a woman who had loved too much and had never been loved in return. Ethan woke with a start. Sweat drenched his pillow. He couldn't understand why the dream haunted him, but he was sure of one thing: his heart ached. A vague longing, a quiet regret began to stir inside. The next morning, for the first time in years, Ethan returned to the old neighborhood. The alleys had been replaced with new apartment blocks. There was no trace of the tiny rental room he once lived in. The new residents didn't know Rosa. The elderly ones only shook their heads. She left a long time ago. Ethan felt like a stranger in his own past. He walked the narrow streets where he and his mother used to shop, passed by the old banyan tree where she used to rest, past the steamed bun stall she bought from whenever she had extra tips. Then he saw her, not with his eyes, but with memory. The image of her sitting quietly beneath the banyan tree, sunlight catching her silver hair, smiling softly as she watched him eat steamed buns. It struck him with piercing clarity. Among the overlapping echoes of memory, Ethan sat down on the stone bench beneath the banyan tree. A child ran past. A familiar voice called out, "Hot buns here." The breeze stirred gently. And for the first time, Ethan wept. No longer the strong, composed businessman, just a son who had gone too long without whispering, "Mom." Part 3. Returning in silence. After that evening beneath the Bodhi tree, Ethan was no longer the same man. He didn't suddenly become enlightened, nor did peace wash over him all at once. But something fundamental had shifted. He had stopped running. He asked to stay at the monastery for a few days. Each morning, he rose with the ringing of the temple bell, sitting in silent meditation with the monks. At first, his head was still noisy. Conference calls, deadlines, and mental to-do lists echoed in loops. But day by day, those voices grew dimmer. In their place came the rustle of falling leaves, the quiet shuffle of bare feet on stone, and the soft chanting of sutras, like an ancient lullaby sung by the earth itself. Ethan learned to wash dishes slowly with both hands, sweep the courtyard as if clearing the dust from his own heart, and eat each humble meal with deep gratitude. One afternoon, the elderly monk invited him to sit beneath the shade of a tree. "Does it still hurt?" the monk asked gently. Ethan nodded. There was no need to hide anymore. "Master," he whispered, "if I could go back, I would do everything differently. But my mother is gone. What do I do with this regret?" The monk looked up at a branch swaying in the breeze and smiled. "Do you know why the leaf is not afraid to fall?" Ethan shook his head. "Because it knows the earth is there to receive it." Then the monk said, "You cannot change the past, but the present is always yours to choose. When you live with compassion, the same love your mother gave you, in every breath you take, she is still with you. You don't need to find the mother you lost. Become the son she hoped for, today and every day. That is your apology. That is how you let go." Ethan sat in silence. The words weren't lofty philosophy, but they sank into the dry cracks of his soul like fresh, gentle rain. The next morning, he left the monastery. Not because he had grown weary, but because it was time to live. Truly live. He returned to the city, no longer the man who once chased only success and accolades. He began volunteering at children's shelters, teaching music to orphans. Once, music had been his ladder to fame. Now, it became his bridge to healing. A way to connect, to listen, to whisper the love he once received, now passed on in humble melodies. Whenever one of the children called him dad or teacher, he didn't correct them. He simply smiled, as if someone far away, and yet very near, was smiling with him. He started journaling again. In one entry, he wrote, "Mother didn't want me to do something grand. She only wanted me to love others with a true heart. And when I do that, I know she is still alive in me." Part 4. Facing the past. Ethan's new life had found its rhythm. He no longer wrestled with the past, nor did he crave praise or recognition. Each day was simple: teaching music, talking with children, and sometimes joining community meditation sessions. Occasionally, he wrote down his reflections, compiling them into small stories posted on a quiet blog, not for fame, but to share. But life, like a river that never ceases to flow, always brings new tests. One day, during a music event at an art school, Ethan was invited as a guest judge. As he entered the waiting room, he froze. Sitting across from him was a man he hadn't seen in decades. The man looked up. Their eyes met. And in that split second, everything came rushing back: the shouting, the slamming doors, his mother's tears. The man was Andrew, the neighbor who had once humiliated Ethan's mother without mercy. Ethan's heart clenched. His chest tightened. He didn't feel rage, but peace was distant. Andrew clearly recognized him, though he tried to remain composed. He was older now, with graying hair and tired eyes. The fire in him had dimmed, but memories, even faded, still leave marks. After the performances ended, Andrew approached. "Ethan, I didn't expect to see you. Could we talk?" Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. They sat on a stone bench in the garden. Andrew held a cup of water, hands trembling. He sighed deeply. "Back then, I was harsh. I was filled with anger. Your mother, she was a strong woman. And I'm sorry." Ethan looked at him. His gaze softened, but he didn't speak. "I know an apology can't erase what happened, but I want you to know I've carried regret for years." A long silence passed. Ethan exhaled slowly. No Buddhist teaching came to mind just then, only the beat of his heart and the memory of his mother. Finally, he spoke, gently. "I carried hatred for a long time. But someone once told me, holding on to anger is like clutching a burning coal, waiting for the other person to burn. The one who gets hurt most is yourself." He looked at Andrew. No bitterness in his voice. "I've let it go." Tears welled in Andrew's eyes. He couldn't find words. That evening, Ethan walked home. His heart felt empty, but light. He understood now. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the past bind you anymore. Just as the Buddha once said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other to die. We practice compassion not because others deserve it, but because we deserve peace. Ethan hadn't forgotten his mother, but he finally saw. She didn't want him to live in vengeance, pain, or blame. She wanted him to be at peace. And today, for the first time, he truly touched it from within. Part 5. The Call to Return. Years had passed since Ethan's encounter with Andrew. He had become a beloved teacher, not by preaching, but simply by being. His presence was calm, his gaze steady, and his silence carried a sense of peace that drew people in. He didn't teach Buddhism explicitly, but his way of living was enough. Students found themselves reflecting, softening, changing, not because he told them to, but because he embodied something they longed for. Music, for Ethan, had become a doorway, not to fame, but to the soul. One cold late autumn day, Ethan received a letter. It was from a nursing home in his hometown, the very one where his mother had spent her final years. The letter came from an old nurse, who wrote that a certain elderly woman, though no longer mentally lucid, often mentioned someone named Ethan. The staff thought it might be important and hoped he would come. When Ethan finished reading, his heart ached. He made arrangements to return, a place he once vowed never to see again. The nursing home had changed, yet some corners, some walls still held the breath of his past. That familiar hallway, that small garden out back, it whispered memories of his mother. The woman who called for him wasn't his mother, but her eyes, they held a strange resemblance. When Ethan entered the room, she looked up, eyes full of emotion, and asked, "Ethan, is that you? You've come back." He didn't answer. He just sat down, held her hand, and smiled. He stayed at the home for a week, volunteering to care for the elderly who had no family left. At night, he played soft melodies, no longer melancholic, but like silent prayers. One evening, watching the woman sleep peacefully in her chair, Ethan remembered a dream he'd had as a child, his mother standing beneath a tree, reaching out her hand. That's when it hit him. He'd never truly returned. Returning wasn't about coming back to a place. It was about coming home to himself. It meant facing the memories, the pain, the ghosts he'd tried to bury, and embracing them, as his mother once embraced him, without condition. That night, he went into the garden where a Bodhi tree stood. He sat beneath it, eyes closed. In his stillness, he felt her. She appeared not in sorrow, but in peace. She placed a hand over his heart and smiled, as if to say, "I never left. I've always been here." Tears welled up, not from grief, but from release. Ethan had let go, and in that letting go, he received everything: his mother, his past, and the essence of who he truly was. In that silence, a teaching from the heart of meditation surfaced. No one can save us but ourselves. No one can walk the path for us. But when we pause, let go, and turn inward, the path reveals itself. Ethan opened his eyes. Gentle sunlight filtered through the Bodhi leaves. He stood, walking toward the rooms where the elderly waited. From that day on, he stayed at the nursing home as a permanent volunteer. No one knew he was once famous. No one knew he had once cursed the world. They only knew that when he sat beside them, resting a hand on their shoulder, and smiled, their hearts softened. Some teachings don't need words. Some teachers don't need voices. And some love, like a mother's love, lives on through quiet gestures, compassionate eyes, and the silent choice to simply be there for others. And some sons, like Ethan, only truly grow when they find the courage to return. Some stories don't need an ending, because the journey itself is the awakening. Ethan's story isn't merely about a lost son. It is a quiet echo within all of us, where love and suffering have long coexisted in the same heart. We grow up carrying questions that were never answered. Why didn't my mother hold me when I needed her most? Why did my father remain silent when I fell? Why do the people we love the most often hurt us the deepest? And so we move forward, strong on the outside, successful, shining. Yet inside, there's an emptiness no one has touched. Like Ethan, a son with blame in his heart, yet a longing for love in his soul. And only when he let go of the need for answers did peace finally begin. The Buddha taught, it is our attachment that causes suffering, and it is letting go that brings ease. Not every mother knows how to love the right way, but in essence, there is no mother who does not carry the shadow of her child, whether in this life or from a lifelong past. This story reminds us that awakening doesn't come from grand teachings. It begins when we pause, look deeply into our own wounds, and say, I don't have to run anymore. Just like the Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, he didn't seek liberation in distant places. He sat down. He looked directly into his own sorrow and joy. And from there, light arose. Ethan, too, didn't need an apology from his mother. He didn't need the universe to rearrange the past. He simply needed one quiet moment, where he could forgive, not his mother, but himself. Sometimes, what we need most is not an answer, but someone willing to sit beside us in silence. Sometimes, the greatest teaching doesn't come through words, but through presence. And sometimes, coming home isn't about going back to the past, but about the heart returning to the fullness of the now. Ethan found his mother, not in a single person, but in everyone he chose to care for. In every moment, he was fully present with love. And in that, motherhood was no longer a relationship, but a boundless force of healing. May each of us, no matter how hurt or lost, one day stop and realize we are already enough.